The Marlowe Portrait is an enigma. It provides a wonderful image of the playwright and poet Christopher Marlowe that is now so familiar we take it for granted as his true likeness. However, for all its familiarity, not all academics are convinced it is his painting, and some, in fact, rule him out as a sitter. I think they're wrong. I think there is actually good evidence that this is Marlowe, and the evidence comes from the curious inscription in the top left corner. The painting was found when workmen were renovating Marlowe's old college at Cambridge. It was in late 1952 or 53, and some interior panels were removed from rooms in the old court of Corpus Christi, the specific rooms where Marlowe used to lodge. Two wooden panels, which had been used to support a gas heater in a student's room, were pulled out and thrown onto a builder's skip. A day later, after the pieces had been lying out all night in the rain, a student from the college noticed the planks had a faded image on one side. He took them to the college librarian. On inspection, they turned out to be two halves of a painting dated to 1585, the year after Marlowe was granted his bachelor's degree, and 2 years before he got his master's. The image was initially dirty and scratched, but restoration work by the London firm of W. Holder and Son, opposite Claridge's in Mayfair, brought it back to a respectable condition. Why Marlowe? Well, there are 4 reasons why the painting has been taken for a portrait of Christopher Marlowe. The painting is dated to 1585, and we know that Marlowe was at Corpus Christi from 1580 to 1587. Thus the date fits his time at college. Secondly, the age of the sitter is given as 21, and this indicates that his date of birth would have been 1564. We know that Marlowe was christened on the 24th of February 1564, so it's a fair assumption that he was born several days previously. The location is a perfect fit too. College records indicate that Marlowe had been allocated lodgings in the adjoining room to where the picture was discovered. And fourthly, while Marlowe wasn't the only 21-year-old student who was likely to be occupying that room in the old lodge at Corpus Christi in 1585, one other factor points to him, and that's the way the picture was found. It had been either deliberately concealed or it had been discarded and the wood recycled as timber. Both alternatives are unusual for oil paintings of the period. These things were always valuable, so would normally be preserved. The reason why a portrait of Marlowe might be discarded is that the charges of heresy and the circumstances of his murder were scandalous at the time and caused disgrace to fall on his memory. His fate was seen by Puritans to be an object lesson in impiety and irreligion. It was God's punishment on an unrepentant sinner. With his reputation blackened, no one would want to keep a reminder of his presence in college, so the portrait would have been consigned to oblivion. Now, why do people doubt it was Marlowe? Well, there are a couple of reasons why scholars think it may not be Marlowe's. Firstly, the painting has no name on it. One critic says that it could be any one of 50,000 young men in England at that time, to which I would say that's at least a 10,000-fold exaggeration. How many 21-year-olds were lodged in those particular rooms in 1585? Probably no more than half a dozen, and maybe fewer. They add that portraits of this kind would be beyond the means of students like Marlowe, who attended university on a scholarship. It would simply be too expensive. This would be to ignore the fact that Marlowe was working for the state during his time at Cambridge. There was a Privy Council letter stating that he had done Her Majesty the Queen good service conducting secret affairs on the continent. So it is very likely he was earning money. Finally, they quibble with the date. The Latin words aetatis suae 21 literally mean of his age 21, and therefore can imply that the sitter was simply in his 21st year. By this reckoning, he would only have completed 20 full years at that time, thus he would have been 20 years old when the portrait was painted in 1585. One point of confusion is that England was using the Julian calendar at that time, so the standard year started on Lady Day, the 25th of March, rather than the 1st of January. Since Marlowe was born in February, his birth year would technically have been 1563 in the Julian calendar. Therefore, he would have been in the 22nd year of his life when the portrait was painted in 1585. However, I don't think the date is a disqualifying feature. There are, in fact, several examples from the period where the words aetatis suae clearly refer to the age rather than the year of life. Ros Barber found the epitaph of Thomas Hobbes to be a good example. It states aetatis suae 91, and we know that Hobbes was fully 91 years old when he died. And there are other examples too from the period. The grammar is flexible enough to allow for either reading. Also, the difference is only the matter of around 1 month, and when this is combined with the fact that in those days people paid almost no attention to birthdays, the precise date of birth was also a matter of some vagueness. Impressa. The painting is of a type called an impressa, and these were in fashion in England during the last 2 decades of the 16th century. The distinguishing feature of an impressa is that it included a carefully crafted personal motto. Geoffrey Whitney, a contemporary author, drew attention to their puzzling nature. He said they should have some witty device, expressed with cunning workmanship, something obscure to be perceived at first, whereby, when with further consideration it is understood, it may the greater delight the beholder. Thus the impressor gave a subject the opportunity to express his or her personality through a combination of visual and verbal puzzles. The motto. Those who attribute the portrait to Marlowe do so on account of the date and where it was found. The all-critical feature of the motto is thought to contain little evidence, aside from being in some way vaguely appropriate to Marlowe. The message, quod me nutrit me destruit, means that which nourishes me destroys me. It is a unique and entirely personal adaptation of the well-known motto, qui me alit me extinguit, which accompanied an emblem showing a torch inverted and thereby being extinguished by its own fuel dripping down. It traditionally refers to passion, which motivates ambition and lust for life, but can also trap and snare a person or bring them down. Cupid was sometimes depicted carrying an inverted torch. The motto is far more relevant to Marlowe than has ever been realised. Firstly, the inverted torch symbolism is ideal, as it constitutes a straightforward pun on his name. The verb mar means to spoil or destroy, and the old Scottish noun aloe means a flame or fire. Thus the literal meaning of Marlowe is spoil flame. That's neat, and it's important, but the deeper significance is coded by means of gematria. Given Marlowe's interest in esoteric philosophy, and in particular the forbidden Bible of that subject, the 3 books of occult philosophy written by Henry Cornelius Agrippa, it is all but inevitable he would have turned to Agrippa's gematria code to tailor the numerical properties of his motto. Remember that Agrippa's stepped code with 9 units, 9 tens and 9 hundreds was a primary gematria code, what I call the long code. The code of lesser importance was the ordinal code, what I call the short code, with a straightforward sequence from A is 1 to Z equals 24. Now, it should be borne in mind that the purpose of the word was to express the character and wit of the subject. Gematria provides a perfect means of doing this. It allows for a huge increase in the amount of information carried by the words. Moreover, it does this in an artfully concealed way. Marlowe would certainly not have been the first to think along such lines. A very similar impressa motto was adopted by Mary of Lorraine, the mother of Mary Queen of Scots. This was an image of a phoenix accompanied by the words "En ma fin gît mon commencement." In my end lies my beginning. The motto was later adapted by Mary Queen of Scots herself, and she embroidered this phoenix image while imprisoned in the Tower of London awaiting her execution. The reason for the choice of words in the motto was almost certainly guided by Agrippa's code. Their value of 708 by this means equates them unerringly with a phoenix, excuse my pronunciation, the Greek for the phoenix, 708 by Greek gematria. So what about Marlowe's motto? Why didn't he stick with the original, qui me alit, me extinguit? What were his numerical goals when he came up with the form quod me nutrit, me destruit? When counted, this adaptation of the motto is valued at 1511. There is an obvious reason for this number, because it is also the value of Master Kit Marlowe. This was not just his name, but recognised his newly acquired title. The designation Master came thanks to the bachelor's degree he gained that year. The occasion of the portrait was to celebrate and commemorate his graduation. It was quite an achievement for the cobbler's son from Canterbury, and all the more so since he could afford an oil-painting portrait, dressed in sumptuous clothing, a slashed velvet and silk doublet. He was announcing his arrival and his boundless ambition. Another clue to the sitter's identity comes in the form of a rebus, a pictorial puzzle. The word rebus comes from the Latin expression non verbis sed rebus, not by words, but by things. The initial hint of this comes in the top 2 lines of the inscription, where it seems that the year 1585 has been arbitrarily placed. Looking more closely, the second 5 appears slightly askew. It's smaller and shallower than the first, and inclined on a sharper angle. The overall effect is to place this subtly defective number plumb beneath the ash ligature of Aetatis. If the value of AE, the ash, which is 6, is docked from 1585, the remainder is 1579. This counts the value of Christopher Marlowe. There are 2 further clues pointing to this distinctive number. Firstly, it will be noticed that the 2 antonyms, nutrit and destruit, sum to 1117. This turns out to be 1579 divided by the square root of 2. By contrast, the first and last words, nut, quod and destruit, sum to 912, and this gives 1579 divided by the square root of 3. This seems to be something more than a coincidence, and I believe the reason for this is to be found in the implied geometry. The two numbers serve to limn the name Christopher Marlowe by means of the square and the compass. 1117 marks a side of a square with a diagonal of 1579, and 912 marks the width of a vesica with a height of 1579. It's possible that this marks his initiation into an early form of Freemasonry. There have always been links between secret societies and the secret services. In support of this, the sitter's posture with folded arms is unusual for a portrait of the time, and it might be interpreted to signify a keeper of secrets. Another possibility is that a vesica was chosen rather than the more obvious figure of a circle on account of its perimeter. Being well grounded in geometry, Marlowe would have known that the perimeter of this vesica measures 3819. Having an equally thorough background in Christian scripture, he may also have understood that 3819 is the gematria value of the words from 1 Corinthians 3:13. Ekastu to ergon epion estin to pir dokimase. Excuse my Greek pronunciation. The fire shall try every man's work for what sort it is. It seems rather fitting. A second rebus may be indicated by the prominent gold buttons on the sitter's doublet. A count reveals there are 33, of which 30 are complete and 3 are partial. By gematria, the initials CM are counted 3 and 30. And conspiracy theorists will probably detect further Masonic significance in this number. Whilst on the subject of the doublet, it can be noticed that the effect of the bright orange silk revealed through the pinked slashes in the outer velvet gives the impression of red-hot embers. Added to this, the sitter's bouffant auburn hair has a passing resemblance to the flames streaming from the body of a phoenix. Another rebus may be found on account of the convention of writing the letter U as a V. Thus, the words in the motto have the visual appearance of including 3 V's. If taken as such, it would increase the gematria total from 1511 to 3011. This is the value of Master Christopher Marlowe, which transliterates as Master Christopher Marlowe. It pairs very neatly with Master Kit Marlowe coming in at 1511, even though the meaning of master is seeker or searcher rather than master. The number of letters and numbers in the inscription could also have significance. If the ash ligatures in Aetatis Suae are counted single rather than as pairs, the overall letter count of the inscription is 38. If this is multiplied by the number of digits in his age and the date, which is 6, we find that 38 times 6 is 228. In English, 228 gives the value of a firebrand, while in Greek it equates with a narthex, which was the giant fennel stalk which Prometheus used to conceal and carry away the fire of the gods. The actual name Prometheus in Greek has a gematria value of 912. Remember, we saw this number above as the value of the terminal words in the motto, quod and distreet. Prometheus was chained up and had his liver eternally destroyed by an eagle sent by Zeus as a punishment for his theft of fire. A grand total for the inscription can now be calculated from the combination of the top line of text, the age, the date, and the motto. Added together, they make 3,903. This is 1301 times 3, and it can therefore represent the name Kit Marlowe, in Greek, in the form of an equilateral triangle. An upright equilateral triangle is the alchemical symbol of fire. Finally, our grand total can be made a touch grander by the addition of 3. In this case, the 3 would stand for the 3 invisible letters indicated by the line over deni, meaning domini. The new total of 3,903 plus 3 is 3,906. And it provides the value of the title Christopher Marlowe, Pyrsos. This means Christopher Marlowe, Firebrand. By all of these symbolic means, the inscription strongly reinforces the identification of Christopher Marlowe as the sitter. Every feature is congruent with this interpretation, and the portrait fits him like a glove. While there is no cryptological proof, as such, the impressor was never designed for such a purpose. Those who saw the painting hanging on the wall of his lodgings would have been well aware whose face it revealed. The numerical and verbal designs were intended simply as puzzles of cunning workmanship for the entertainment of his friends. Something obscure to be perceived at the first, whereby, when with further consideration it is understood, it may the greater delight the beholder.